That rumpled raincoat, that ever-present cigar, and that battered convertible, Lieutenant Columbo's iconic car, became almost as famous as the detective himself. But behind the shabby exterior lies a tangled web of mystery involving French actors, missing engines, license plate swaps, and a design originally rejected by Fiat. From the car that didn't run to the one selling for $350,000, these bizarre stories reveal the unexpected truth about television's most famous beater. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Columbo's Peugeot 403 convertible. Fact 1. Peter Falk found it without an engine. When the creators of Columbo decided their rumpled detective needed a car to match his personality, they gave Peter Falk a simple assignment: tour the Universal Studios backlot and pick something that felt right for the character. This was just one day before filming was scheduled to begin, so there wasn't much time to deliberate. Falk walked through rows and rows of vehicles, examining every make and model imaginable. But nothing seemed to click with his vision of who Columbo should be. Then, tucked away in a back corner of the lot, he spotted just the nose of an old convertible sticking out from behind other cars. That beaten-up Peugeot 403 Cabriolet was in rough shape, to put it mildly. According to Falk himself in later interviews, the car didn't even run when he first laid eyes on it. Some sources claim the situation was even more extreme, reporting that the vehicle was completely missing its engine at the time. Despite these serious mechanical issues, or perhaps because of them, Falk immediately knew he'd found what he was looking for. Without hesitation, he turned to the production team and declared, "This is the one." The choice seemed absurd to everyone around him. Here was a car that couldn't even be driven off the lot under its own power, yet Falk insisted it was perfect for his character. The studio had to scramble to make the vehicle functional enough for filming, but Falk's instinct proved correct. That non-running, possibly engineless wreck became one of the most recognizable cars in television history, proving that sometimes the worst condition makes for the best character match. Fact 2. The design was rejected by Fiat. The elegant curves of the Peugeot 403 might have ended up on a completely different car if persistent rumors about its origin story are true. According to automotive historians, the design that eventually became Columbo's iconic ride was originally created by the famous Italian design house Pininfarina for Fiat, not Peugeot. The plan was for this new design to replace the Fiat 1900, which was getting outdated by the early 1950s. Pininfarina, led by the legendary designer Battista Pininfarina, presented their sleek, modern concept to executives in Turin, where Fiat was headquartered. The design featured flowing lines and smooth curves. That represented a dramatic departure from the boxy, angular cars that were common at the time. However, Fiat's decision-makers looked at the futuristic design and decided it was simply too avant-garde for their conservative customer base. They felt the radical styling was too far ahead of its time and worried it wouldn't be accepted by traditional Italian car buyers. Instead of moving forward with the design, Fiat chose to delay replacing their 1900 model for another 4 years, sticking with more conventional updates. Rather than let the design go to waste, Pininfarina reportedly turned to the French automaker Peugeot and offered them the rejected concept. Peugeot's management saw the potential that Fiat had missed and eagerly accepted, making only minor modifications to adapt it for their needs. When the Peugeot 403 debuted at the Trocadero Palace in Paris in April of 1955, it became an instant sensation. The irony is that the design Fiat considered too bold went on to sell over 1 million units for Peugeot, making it the company's first car to reach that milestone. Fact 3. It may have belonged to French actor Roger Pierre. One of the most intriguing mysteries surrounding Columbo's car involves how a French convertible that was never officially sold in America ended up at Universal Studios in the first place. According to one popular theory, the Peugeot 403 originally belonged to Roger Pierre, a well-known French comedian and actor who was part of the famous comedy duo Pierre and Pesquet. The story goes that Pierre brought his personal 403 Cabriolet with him when he traveled to the United States and eventually made his way to Los Angeles. Once in California, Pierre apparently decided he wanted a more American driving experience and traded his French convertible for a Cadillac convertible, which was considered the ultimate symbol of American luxury at the time. This version of events was actually confirmed by Jean-Marc Thibault, who was Roger Pierre's close friend and comedy partner, lending some credibility to the story. Thibault mentioned the trade during a French television interview years later, giving specific details about how Pierre had grown tired of the European car and wanted something that fit better with the Hollywood lifestyle. However, this account creates a significant contradiction with Peter Falk's own recollections of discovering the car. Falk always maintained that he found the vehicle abandoned and in terrible condition at the Universal Studios lot, describing it as a forgotten wreck that nobody wanted. The question that nobody has been able to answer definitively is how Roger Pierre's car would have ended up at Universal if he traded it to a private buyer for a Cadillac. Did Pierre sell it directly to someone at the studio? Did it pass through a dealership that later sold it to Universal? Or are these actually two different cars entirely? The mystery remains unsolved to this day. Fact 4. Peugeot never officially exported cabriolets to the USA. Here's where the mystery of Columbo's car gets even stranger. While Peugeot actively marketed and sold their 403 sedans in the United States during the 1950s and 1960s. The company's official records show they never exported a single cabriolet model to American shores. This wasn't just an oversight or a gap in their distribution strategy, it was a deliberate business decision. The convertible version was expensive to produce, cost significantly more than the sedan, and Peugeot executives apparently didn't believe there would be enough demand in the American market to justify the shipping costs and import taxes. The four-door sedans were readily available at Peugeot dealerships across the United States, marketed as sophisticated European alternatives to American cars. But if you wanted the stylish convertible version, you were completely out of luck unless you lived in Europe. This makes the appearance of a 403 Cabriolet at Universal Studios even more puzzling, because according to the manufacturer's own export records, that car should not have existed on American soil through any official channels. When Columbo became a massive hit and the Peugeot 403 Cabriolet turned into one of the most recognizable cars on television, journalists naturally reached out to Peugeot headquarters in France for comment. The company's representatives were asked to explain how their convertible ended up in Hollywood when they never sold any in America. Remarkably, Peugeot officials admitted they had no idea how the vehicle got there and couldn't provide any explanation for its presence at the studio. The car that became Peugeot's most famous model in the United States was apparently never meant to be there in the first place. Fact 5. Only 2,050 were ever made worldwide. The Peugeot 403 Cabriolet wasn't just rare in America, it was extraordinarily rare everywhere in the world. From the time production began in 1956 until it ended in the spring of 1961, Peugeot manufactured only 2,050 units of the convertible model across their entire global production run. To put that number in perspective, the standard sedan version of the 403 sold over 1 million units during roughly the same period, making the Cabriolet less than 1% of total 403 production. The reason for these dismal sales numbers becomes clear when you look at the pricing strategy Peugeot chose for the convertible. In 1958, the Cabriolet model cost a staggering 80% more than the entry-level sedan version, which meant buyers were essentially paying nearly double the price just to get the open-top experience. This price tag was so high that in France, purchasing one 403 Cabriolet cost the same amount as buying two brand-new Peugeot 203 sedans, which were Peugeot's previous model and still quite popular. The convertible came with luxury features like high-quality leather upholstery and refined interior trim. But even these premium touches couldn't justify the massive price difference for most potential buyers. The irony is that while the 403 Cabriolet was a commercial disaster that nearly nobody wanted to buy when it was new, it became one of the most sought-after French classic cars decades later, entirely because of its association with Lieutenant Columbo. Today, collectors pay well over $100,000 for restored examples, and some screen-used models have been valued at several $100,000, proving that television fame can turn a commercial failure into an extremely valuable piece of automotive history. Fact 6. The car was transported on a trailer. While viewers watched Lieutenant Columbo drive his battered Peugeot all over Los Angeles in every episode, the reality behind the scenes was quite different. The original 403 that Peter Falk selected was in such poor mechanical condition that Universal Studios couldn't risk having it break down during the commute to filming locations. According to production records, the car was carefully moved to each location on a trailer rather than being driven there under its own power, which created an amusing contradiction between what audiences saw on screen and what actually happened during production. This trailer transport method served multiple purposes for the studio. First and foremost, it protected their investment in an extremely rare vehicle that would have been nearly impossible to replace if something went wrong on the road. Remember, only about 2,000 of these convertibles were ever made, and finding another one in the United States would have been exceptionally difficult given that Peugeot never officially exported them to America. The studio recognized they had stumbled onto something special and couldn't afford to lose it to a mechanical breakdown on some random highway between Los Angeles and a filming site. The irony of this situation wasn't lost on the cast and crew. Here was a car that was supposed to represent a detective's unreliable, barely functioning daily driver, yet it was being pampered and protected like a precious museum piece whenever the cameras stopped rolling. The vehicle that looked like it could barely make it around the block on television was actually being transported more carefully than most of the luxury cars driven by the wealthy murder suspects in the show. This behind-the-scenes reality made the Peugeot even more of a Hollywood illusion than anyone watching at home could have imagined. Fact 7. 4 different cars were used in production. Despite the illusion that Columbo drove the same faithful car throughout the series, Universal Studios actually used 4 separate Peugeot 403 convertibles during the show's original run from 1967 to 1978. This rotation system was common practice in television production, especially for shows that put vehicles through demanding filming schedules and scripted accidents. But finding multiple examples of an ultra-rare French convertible presented unique challenges for the studio's transportation department. What makes this situation particularly puzzling is that Universal reportedly leased at least 2 or 3 additional 403 models directly from Peugeot to supplement the original car that Peter Falk had chosen. The mystery here is how Peugeot managed to provide beat-up, aged convertibles that matched the shabby appearance of the original vehicle. These cars would have needed to look worn and neglected to maintain continuity with the battered appearance that viewers expected. Yet Peugeot was a major automaker that typically dealt in new vehicles or pristine classics for promotional purposes. The question of where they found multiple weathered 403 cabriolets just lying around in their inventory has never been adequately explained. Some automotive historians have speculated that Peugeot may have tracked down older models from private owners or pulled them from storage facilities in France, then shipped them to California specifically for the production. Others suggest the studio may have artificially aged newer or better-conditioned cars to match the original's appearance. A few fans who took the Universal Studios tour over the years reported seeing as many as 3 of the Peugeots parked together in the backlot storage area, which confirmed that multiple vehicles were maintained simultaneously to ensure filming could continue even if one car was being repaired or modified for specific scenes. Fact 8. the license plate changed networks. Eagle-eyed fans of Columbo who watched the show from beginning to end noticed something peculiar about the detective's license plate over the years. During the original NBC run from 1971 to 1978, the Peugeot displayed California license plate number 044-APD, which became so iconic that some devoted fans even got vanity plates with the same number for their own cars. However, when the show was revived on ABC starting in 1989, the car suddenly had a completely different plate reading, 448-DBZ, and this new number remained for all the later episodes. The most straightforward explanation for this change is that NBC retained custody of the original license plate number as part of their property from the first series, preventing ABC from using it when they brought the show back over a decade later. This kind of intellectual property division between networks was common when shows changed hands, though it rarely involved something as specific as a license plate number. However, dedicated Columbo fans have developed more creative theories to explain the switch within the show's fictional universe. 1. Popular fan theory suggests that after the original series ended, Columbo's beloved Peugeot sat unused for so long that the registration expired and the state of California reassigned the 044-APD plate to someone else. According to this explanation, when Columbo needed to renew his registration for the revival series, he had no choice but to accept a new number. Another fan proposed an elaborate backstory involving Columbo blowing his head gasket while chasing a suspect, leaving the car sitting in his driveway for months while he saved up for repairs and drove his wife's car to work instead, ultimately leading to an expired registration and a new plate assignment. Fact 9. Columbo gets his facts wrong on screen. For a detective known for his meticulous attention to detail and photographic memory, Lieutenant Columbo demonstrates a surprising lack of knowledge about his own beloved car in at least one episode of the series. During a conversation with another character, Columbo proudly describes his Peugeot as a rare 1950 model, when in reality the car was actually manufactured in 1959, making him off by 9 full years. This glaring error is particularly amusing because Columbo spends the entire series catching criminals by noticing tiny inconsistencies in their stories, yet he can't even get the model year of his own vehicle correct. The detective also makes another dubious claim about his car's rarity during the show, stating with apparent confidence that there are only 3 like it in the entire country. While the 403 Cabriolet was certainly uncommon in the United States, this specific number was highly unlikely to be accurate even in the 1970s when the episode aired. Given that over 2,000 of these convertibles were manufactured globally and at least some made their way to America through private imports and other channels, the true number was almost certainly higher than 3, though exact figures were impossible to verify. These factual errors have sparked debate among fans about whether they were intentional character choices or simply mistakes by the show's writers. Some viewers argue that Columbo genuinely doesn't know much about cars and just repeats incorrect information he heard somewhere, which fits with his blue-collar, non-mechanical personality. Others suggest the writers deliberately included these errors as subtle jokes, showing that even the brilliant detective has blind spots when it comes to topics outside his expertise in criminal investigation. Fact 10. Peugeot refused a product placement deal. After several seasons of Columbo became a massive hit, the show's producers began thinking about updating the detective's vehicle or at least getting a fresher example of the same model. They reached out to Peugeot headquarters in France with what seemed like a mutually beneficial proposition. The company could provide a new or newer 403 for the show, gaining valuable product placement in one of America's most popular television series. To the producers' surprise, Peugeot executives delivered a swift and emphatic rejection, refusing to have anything to do with the arrangement. The reason for this refusal became clear when Peugeot officials explained their position. They were genuinely horrified by how their vehicle was being portrayed on American television. From their perspective in the company's offices in Sochaux, France, the 403 was a carefully crafted automobile that represented decades of engineering excellence and partnership with the legendary Italian designer Pininfarina. They had invested enormous resources into creating what they considered a masterpiece of automotive design, only to watch it become famous in America as a battered, unreliable wreck that was constantly the subject of jokes and insults from wealthy murder suspects. The bitter irony of the situation was not lost on anyone involved. The only Peugeot model that had achieved genuine fame and recognition in the United States was being presented in the worst possible light, and executives at the French automaker feared this association would permanently damage their brand image with American consumers. They preferred to have their cars remain in complete obscurity rather than be associated with Columbo's disreputable vehicle, essentially choosing invisibility over negative publicity. The company's firm stance meant the show had to continue using their aging original cars without any official support from the manufacturer. Fact 11. The original car was found in Ohio. When ABC announced they were reviving Columbo in 1988, more than a decade after the original NBC series ended, producers faced an unexpected problem. Universal Studios had sold the iconic Peugeot, and nobody knew where it had gone. The studio launched a search to locate the authenticated original vehicle, knowing that fans would notice if they tried to substitute a different car. After investigating several leads, they discovered that the real Columbo car had ended up in Findlay, Ohio, in the possession of a couple named James and Connie Delaney, who had purchased it after the final episode of the original series aired. The Delaneys had bought the car legitimately and were thrilled to own such a famous piece of television history. When Universal contacted them about using the vehicle for the revival series, the couple agreed to lend it back for filming, but firmly refused to sell it outright, having grown attached to their unique collectible over the years. This arrangement allowed the new episodes to maintain authenticity, while the Delaneys retained ownership of their prized possession. What made this search more complicated was that several other collectors came forward claiming they owned the real Columbo car. At least one collector in Florida and another in California each insisted their 403 Cabriolet was the genuine article from the show. However, after Universal's authentication process examined the vehicles and compared them against production records and photographs, these pretenders were officially disavowed as not being the actual car that Peter Falk had selected and driven during the original series. The Ohio vehicle was confirmed as the authenticated original, though the existence of multiple claimants highlighted just how desirable ownership of this particular piece of television memorabilia had become. Fact 12. One authentic car still has camera mounting equipment. Jim and Connie Delaney, the couple who owned the authenticated original Columbo car for over 40 years, made a remarkable decision about how to maintain their famous vehicle. Rather than restoring it to pristine showroom condition like most classic car collectors would do, they deliberately kept the Peugeot in exactly the same worn state it was in when they purchased it from Universal Studios, complete with all the battle scars and modifications from years of television production. Most notably, the car still had the original camera mounting rod bracket attached, which was the metal framework used by film crews to secure cameras for those iconic driving shots of Columbo puttering around Los Angeles. This camera equipment was a crucial piece of production history that proved the car's authenticity and showed how certain scenes were actually filmed. The mounting bracket allowed camera operators to attach their equipment directly to the vehicle for stable, close-up shots of Peter Falk while he was driving, creating the intimate feeling that viewers were riding along with the detective. Most production cars have all such equipment removed and discarded after filming wraps, but the Delaneys recognized the historical value of keeping everything intact. By 2023, the couple decided it was time to downsize their car collection and put the Columbo Peugeot up for sale. They set an asking price of $350,000, a staggering amount that reflected both the car's rarity and its unique place in television history. However, finding a buyer proved challenging, as the Delaneys noted that younger generations simply didn't have the same connection to Columbo that older fans did, making it difficult to find someone willing to pay such a premium for what was essentially a beat-up 50-plus-year-old French convertible, regardless of its Hollywood pedigree. Fact 13. The car was crashed multiple times on screen. Columbo's Peugeot didn't just look battered for aesthetic purposes, it actually went through genuine accidents that were written into the show's scripts and filmed for various episodes. Throughout the series, the car was involved in at least 4 separate crash scenes, with each collision adding authentic damage that remained visible in subsequent episodes. This approach gave the vehicle an increasingly worn appearance that matched the character's shabby persona, while also providing comic relief and plot complications. The most memorable crash occurred in the 1978 episode titled Make Me a Perfect Murder, which opened with a spectacular collision sequence. The episode begins with Columbo singing loudly while trying to reattach his fallen rearview mirror as he drives, which naturally distracts him from the road ahead. He inadvertently gets caught up in a high-speed police chase and ends up being rear-ended by a uniformed officer's patrol car in a moment of chaotic traffic. The impact was substantial enough that Columbo had to wear a neck brace for approximately the first third of the episode, turning what could have been a throwaway gag into an extended physical comedy element that Peter Falk milked for all it was worth. The rear-end collision left a significant dent in the Peugeot's bumper that production decided to leave in place rather than repair, adding to the car's progressively deteriorating appearance. Another notable accident happened in the episode A Matter of Honor, where Columbo rear-ends a taxi while visiting Mexico, resulting in his car being impounded by local authorities and forcing him to stay longer to solve the case. These scripted crashes served multiple purposes. They added humor, created plot complications, and most importantly, they justified why the car looked worse and worse as the seasons progressed. Fact 14. Peter Falk initially resisted having a car. The iconic Peugeot that became inseparable from Lieutenant Columbo's character almost never happened because Peter Falk actively opposed the entire concept. During the planning stages for the episode Death Lends a Hand, show creators Richard Levinson and William Link came up with the idea that Columbo should drive a dilapidated car that matched his rumpled appearance and working-class background. When they presented this concept to Falk, the actor immediately pushed back against what he saw as an unnecessary addition to an already well-defined character. From Falk's perspective, Columbo already had plenty of distinctive characteristics that set him apart from other television detectives. The character had his constantly mentioned but never seen wife, whose presence added a humanizing domestic element to the hardened detective. He had the ever-present cigar that was always in his hand or mouth, creating a casual informality that disarmed suspects. Most iconically, he had the wrinkled beige raincoat that became synonymous with the character and symbolized his unpretentious nature. In Falk's view, adding yet another quirky element would push the character into gimmick territory and potentially make him seem like a collection of props rather than a fully realized person. Falk argued firmly that enough was enough, and no more distinctive features were needed to make Columbo memorable or effective as a detective character. However, the creators eventually convinced him to at least look at some options on the Universal backlot, and that reluctant tour led to Falk's discovery of the battered Peugeot. Despite his initial resistance, once Falk saw the car, his instincts as an actor kicked in, and he immediately recognized how perfectly it complemented everything else about the character, proving that sometimes the best creative decisions come from overcoming initial objections. Fact 15. An original car is rotting in Mexico. Perhaps the saddest story surrounding any of the Columbo Peugeots involves one of the original production vehicles that allegedly ended up abandoned and neglected in a storage yard located in Ensenada, Mexico, just south of the California border. According to reports from fans and automotive historians who have investigated the car's whereabouts, this particular 403 was left parked in an outdoor lot near the ocean, where it has been exposed to the harsh coastal environment for years with no protection or maintenance whatsoever. The location near high tides proved particularly damaging to the already fragile vehicle. Salt water and ocean spray gradually corroded the metal body, eating away at the Peugeot's frame and mechanical components in a way that would be nearly impossible to reverse, even with extensive restoration efforts. Making matters worse, the abandoned car became a target for local pranksters who apparently thought it would be funny to fill the interior with fish, which were left to rot in the California sun. This bizarre act of vandalism added biological decay to the existing problems of rust and structural deterioration. Despite numerous attempts by Columbo enthusiasts to verify the car's authenticity and condition over the years, very few people have actually been able to inspect this particular vehicle in person. The evidence pointing toward it being one of the genuine, original cars from the television production remains strong, but without proper documentation or access, definitive proof has been difficult to establish. What makes this situation especially tragic is that this piece of television history, which brought joy to millions of viewers and helped define one of the most beloved detective characters ever created, now sits forgotten and crumbling in a foreign storage yard, slowly being destroyed by neglect and the elements. Neglect and the elements. Neglect and the elements. Neglect and the elements.